Hollywood Scriptwriter Magazine is a trade publication that profiles screenwriters, producers, and directors. We let you into their lives where they tell you how they made their mark in one of the toughest industries of Hollywood, the big screen. Subscribe today at hollywoodscriptwriter.com. I'm Angela Cranon. In the studio today is Jeffrey Morris, an award-winning writer, director, producer, entrepreneur, and production designer. Welcome to Hollywood Scriptwriter Magazine's Spotlight of Screenwriters, Producers, and Directors. Wow, that's a lot of titles there.
Yes,
is there one particular that represents your true passion and skills?
Yeah, I do wear a lot of different hats, and that's by necessity to some degree. But as far as my passion, I do enjoy directing and designing. But I think that screenwriting is probably my primary interest and focus, because without a good script, you don't have a basis for anything. You gotta get the script right. So that's the part that I feel is my biggest strength and interest in a lot of ways. It's writing. So yeah.
And what genre do you normally focus on? Is there one in particular?
Yeah, we're focused solely on science fiction. And when I say science fiction, it's really in the true meaning of the term, where we're really looking at science and scientific, real technology, projected technology, scientific concepts, and that becomes the basis of telling a story, right? So in other words, in some ways, we're living in a world right now that's science fiction for somebody. The iPhone, if you go back far enough, is science fiction for someone, right? The driving in a car, right? There's all these things, but we take that for granted. But I believe that's telling stories about the realities of science and projections of where things could be going. That's what I'm really into. Speculative fiction, speculating.
So is it like the Jetsons? Remember that cartoon? I'm sort of telling my age right now, but
No, I'm gonna say it's more like, what's it like? It's like, if you see 2001: A Space Odyssey, you ever see that movie? Right? Okay, it's they were really trying to tell a story there that was set, decades in the future, and they were trying to project, like, what might it be like to travel to the moon, live on the moon. What kind of things might they encounter? That's the kind of storytelling that I'm trying to do. So, like, for example, my Oceanus, the underwater movie that I've got, project, that's really trying to project what would it be like to live underwater in an underwater city. That's something that's been interesting to me since I was a kid, the idea of something like that. So that's the kind of science fiction I'm doing. So then what I do is I work with technical advisors and scientists to try to understand, how would you really live underwater? And I have what I call the 85% rule, where we try to get the science and technology 85% right, and then we give ourselves like a 15% margin to have some fun and put a little bit of the exciting fantasy elements in there that really, because again, we're not making a documentary, right? We're making a movie. So
you must have a grand imagination.
It's always been part of who I am, going all the way back to childhood. So yeah.
So why science fiction, though? Is it just a personal interest, or because of your imagination, or what?
I think that that's a really interesting question. If I go back to when I was a kid, I wasn't that excited about the reality of the world around me. I was growing up in kind of post-civil rights era Phoenix, and in a school that had just been, we were just hitting integration, right? And it was a time period when there were a lot of conflicts, a lot of fights on the playground, a lot of stuff that was really quite awful. And when I look at that, and what I was facing was nothing compared to what my parents had faced, right? And their parents had faced, and so on and so forth. And to me, the better days, they lie ahead. That's how I saw it as a child. So when I would watch something like the original Star Trek, and I would see Uhura on the bridge of the Enterprise, and Sulu and Chekhov, a Russian, right? I'm seeing people integrating in an environment where their race or their nationality, their political, that none of that mattered. We'd gotten past that, and we were now exploring the stars together, and facing new challenges and new ideas. So to me, when I looked at those worlds of tomorrow, they always represented a better possible future for humanity. So I think that science fiction became a way to explore better futures, and also by exemplifying those better futures, you're also hopefully making a better today. Allowing people to say, okay, maybe we can make today better. If we, how do we get to that better future? Well, we got to make today better.
Before we get to your projects, you say a world that's better today, but is it really?
No. No. I mean, I think that the sad part is that a lot of science fiction that I, grew up with and read and watched and everything, it was supposed to be a warning about the future in a lot of ways. And now what's happened is it starts to feel like almost like a roadmap. It's like, folks, you were supposed to learn from this, and everything. So
we're going around in a circle.
They were going around in circles. So no, I think that we're in a very, very frustrating and very sad place actually right now. But when I was referring to when when I became interested in science fiction, it was about the future back in the 1970s. But I will tell you, I never would have imagined ever would have imagined that we would be in the year 2022 and you'd have people thinking the Earth was flat and I mean, I could go on and on and on, with all the kind of things that are going on nowadays. It's devastating to watch, Well,
see, to me, and that makes it more interesting in how do you come up with your projects? Because you're working with science or scientists and something that should appear to be likely, but yet it may not be likely. So it's more of a fantasy.
Well, I'll give you an example. So my movie Persephone, we're using climate change as really the foundation of why we end up going to another planet. Yeah, we end up going to another planet to live because we've basically messed this one up to a degree that we can't live on it anymore in a viable way. And so we are addressing climate change as part of the root DNA of that story. There's another one, OCEANUS, my underwater adventure. It eventually gets to the concept of a cataclysm that is going to basically be kind of a reboot for humanity that forces people to rethink settling and living, but we're forced to do it underwater now in the story. So these are all stories that are about the future, but they're finding ways to sort of take what's going on nowadays and say, hey, if we don't change what we're doing, it could end up like this.
And I'm more hoping, of a message now.
Absolutely. So yes, when I was a child, it was about hope. It was about hope, right? And sadly, and I'm trying to figure that out, right? I'm trying to go, okay, I got to challenge myself to tell stories that are hopeful. And I do believe my stories have hope in them. But look, it's like if you start talking about the future, we have to deal with the future means we have something between what's now and what's then. And when I look at what's now, I see a lot of issues and I see a lot of problems and I don't see a lot of solutions. Exactly. That will become then, right? Yeah. Exactly. So that's all part of it. You're absolutely right. So yes, compared to my team and I, creative team, and I talk a lot about how we're all very disappointed in how the world has actually turned out. And it's instead of telling these hopeful stories, now we're telling stories about, hey, how do we fix this? Where do we go if we don't fix it? Right? That sort of thing. So
that's wonderful. Now, tell me about your projects. Let's get to all your projects.
Sure.
Well, don't forget FutureDude.com either.
Yeah. Well, so FutureDude is really a kind of a little portal to some of the things I'm working on right now. But we've got 3 key projects that we're focused on. One is an animated project called Parallel Man, which started out as an animated short film that we did a few years back, starring John Cho, Lance Reddick, and Ming-Na Wen. They did the voices. And it's a story about the multiverse and an adventure there. And it follows the idea of sort of a totalitarian regime that's going and taking over various Earths and stealing their resources and that sort of thing. And it's about a guy who starts to figure out that this is wrong and he turns against it and creates a rebellion. It's part of a rebellion. That was also a 7-issue comic book series and a collected trade paperback graphic novel. And we also did a mobile device game with Parallel Man. So there's a lot of stuff we did with that. We're currently, it's on YouTube right now. And in the last 2 months, it's had nearly 1 million views. It's done really, really well. Great, super positive comments and response.
Is that the 1 million reviews in 10 days? Is that the one?
Oh yeah. It was insane. I mean, we're like 99% positive feedback and for the audience and stuff. So it's great. I made that years ago and it was really frustrating because I took it out to various streamers and studios and I tried to get it going and people didn't get the multiverse thing yet. When I did it, they didn't understand. Now they do, and I think they're more open to it. So I think we've got a good shot. So we're planning to. I just broke. I've done the breakdown for a feature film of that, and it'll be an animated feature film. My goal is to be into production on that next year in 2024. So that's Parallel Man. There's Oceanus, which is an underwater adventure, which I mentioned earlier. That was also a short film that we did a few years back, and that's following the adventures of people who live in an underwater city. And there's a husband and wife team, and the wife is learning how to talk to whales with this communication device. Husband's an engineer who has helped design and build the base, and a disaster happens that separates them, and they end up in finding their way back to each other. They find both their relationship and who they are, and their love for one another, and also are going to have to face a very uncertain future in that story. So that's being developed as a full feature film right now, that we're going to do, which is basically a reboot of that. We're going to take the ideas that are in the short, but we're going to remix it and turn it into a 2-hour feature film. And that feature film is going to be called Stingray, which is called Stingray Oceanus 1. It's hopefully the first of a trilogy. And I intend to be shooting that in Los Angeles before the end of the year. So that's the plan with that film. So.
Okay.
Yep.
Wow.
And then
a lot going on. Go ahead.
Lastly, one more thing, which is Persephone.
I doubt it's lastly, but go ahead.
Yeah.
Because you have so many things going on.
So Persephone is the big feature that I'm working on right now that's in development, and we plan to shoot that in 2023. And that's going to star Ming-Na Wen and Brianna Hildebrand from Deadpool,
Wow.
and Isai Morales, who is one of my favorite actors of all time, which is great. So he's playing the villain in Mission Impossible 7 and 8. So he's going to be in my film too. So, and then we're also out to a couple more big A-list actors for that film. So that's the film about traveling to another star, that deals with climate change and that sort of thing. And that film, Persephone, will be in theaters hopefully in 24. So we're shooting that in Q3 of 23. That's when I'm playing. So we'll do Oceanus first. Parallel Man's going to take a couple of years because it's animated. So that'll probably come out in 25. And then and I would think Persephone will come out sometime in 24. So that's the plan. So Oceanus 23, Persephone 24, Parallel Man 25. Those are my plans for my 3 movies right now. Now I have a big catalog of intellectual properties I've developed over the years, and we're looking at this as just the basis to get started. We've got a whole bunch of cool sci-fi realistic stuff we want to do over the next 10 years that we're plotting out, and we have a plan. So, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Now, something interesting that you said. Now, Hollywood Scriptwriter is one that likes to educate its readers and its viewers, because we have the seasoned and we have those who are trying to get into the industry. So part of it is learning from people like yourself on how you even got in the industry. And one thing you said was, when they don't get it, so then even though you had the 10 million in 10 days, right? How many was million in 10 days, right? For the viewing. Okay, so when they don't get it, what do you do? I mean, that happens to so many people.
So here's the thing. Let's see. How do I say this? I am very, very. I'm kind of a renegade. I mean, I'm just going to freely say it. And I look at like what Tyler Perry's done, right? Where he identified an underserved audience. And if he'd gone to Hollywood studios and said, "Hey, I want to make movies for this audience," they would have been like, "Well, those people don't, they can come see these movies, right? That kind of thing." He's like, "No, you don't understand. They don't have anything to watch. They don't want to watch that. And I want to create something for them." So he went and found a way to do it. And he built a basis and a foundation to do that. And for me, FutureDude, my brand, is really about doing the same kind of thing, except we're going to do it with this realistic science fiction thing, which is, telling these realistic, believable stories where the science is right and it's plausible and could really happen. Which is different than, Star Trek and Star Wars are fantasy. Ultimately, they take place in space, but they're very fantasy driven. My stuff is very science driven, but science and character balanced. It's not just about the science. The characters have to be the most important thing. So when I answer your question, I guess what I'm trying to do is find and identify an audience that's underserved, and I'm trying to reach them. And so it's not so much, I'm not here trying to compete with Star Trek and Star Wars. I want to build my thing. I want to build the thing that because I know there are people like me who are kind of getting tired of seeing the same old thing over and over and over again, and nothing against it. It's fine. But we can only reboot and remake things so often. Right? It's like it's time for something new, and that's what I'm trying to deliver. So if I have to do that outside the Hollywood system, I will do that. And that's where I am. It's like if I can find Hollywood partners who are willing to, we're able to kind of collaborate and align. Like for example, I have producer of Lord of the Rings, Mark Rodesky, and his producing partner Jane Fleming. They're working with me on Persephone. I've got a lot of Hollywood heavy hitters, Cassian Elways, others who are working with me. But I think part of what excites all these people is that they see a way of bringing something new into the studio system by working with me. So that's one tier, one approach. The other approach for me is to find ways to just work completely outside of the studio system and create stuff, right? That's going to be part of, like, OCEANUS. I'm just going to make it. I'm not, I'm going to make it, and it's kind of like build it, they'll come. It's like I'm putting together the financing. I'm going to make the film I want to make, and that's what I'm going to do. And that's what I did with those short films too. And I don't mean to sound, like arrogant about it. It's just simply, I just feel like someone has to. That's why I look at Tyler. It's like you just have to stand up for what you believe in sometimes, and you got to go make it and make it happen. When I met with Netflix, years ago about, Parallel Man and Oceanus, I don't know, or Amazon, they just, their whole thing was putting it into these different silos, right? So it was like, especially Parallel Man, it was like, well, is it like Archer? No, it's not. Well, is it like this? Is it like Rick and Morty? No. Is it like they kept asking me these questions, and I'm like, no, it's Parallel Man. It's a different thing. It's its own thing, right? And I would try to explain it, and the fact that I couldn't throw it into one of those buckets, they couldn't get their head around it. I'm hoping that at this point they may be more open-minded, but if they aren't, that's okay. We'll find another way. We'll find a way to do it. And the point is, thankfully, I've now got enough of a direction to reach the fans directly through having this stuff streamed, like on Dust. It's been able to, I can prove that people want to watch what I make. That's the thing that's been so great. So now I can take that and I can go to the bank with it. I call it currency in a way, right? That those views, those positive reviews, all that matters, So it helps me to close deals. And if I have to finance it from the outside, I'm going to do it.
Yeah, that's invaluable information, because there's so many screenwriters, producers, and directors where they're thinking differently than what's already been done. And so since the studio can't put it into a pocket, then it's just ignored. But one thing, funding, you talk about funding, that's huge for anybody, whether you be seasoned or not, to try to put together projects. So what is your strategy in getting funding for things that are on the left of what the studios see on the right?
Yeah,
but
well, it's funny because people ask me the question. They say, well, how do you, you're a filmmaker, how do you do this? How do you get to do this? And what I tell them is two things. It's one, you actually have to have a good idea. You have to have, and have worked that idea to the point that you could explain it to somebody, you can visualize it, okay. So you've got a solid concept. And then the thing is to take that concept, and then for me, it's been being an entrepreneur. It's been finding, initially it was getting the friends and family and the seed to launch my company and get that to a place. But it was focusing on business planning and projections and trying to figure out, because one of the things for me is, like, I didn't want to make movies that were just going to be for me and a bunch of my friends, or make movies that would be, I'd just be showing in my basement. I was like, if I'm going to make a film, I want people to see this. But part of it is, who's my audience, right? Do I want everyone to see it? Do I need everyone to see it? Maybe I just need 1 million people to see it. Maybe I need the right 1 million people to see it. If the right 1 million people see it, and then they tell their friends, and they tell their friends, then this thing takes off. It's about targeting it appropriately. So having a business plan that I could put in front of investors that said, here's my audience that I'm going after. And no, I'm not trying to compete with these guys. I just want to make a good film for a moderate budget, a reasonable budget. So that's the other thing, right? A lot of people will just, I always write my scripts based upon what I believe my budget can be. So in other words, if it's going to be a $5 million movie, I write a $5 million movie. In other words, I look at it as a producer. I go, what kind of things can I do for $5 million? And it's really difficult in science fiction, right? Because you're making everything from scratch. It's not like you're, especially space stuff. You're building sets and costumes and doing visual effects and all those sorts of things. So when we're making Persephone for in the $30 million range, something like that. The point with that is. We had to go and justify how do you get this done? How does it all work? We're going to make a film that's going to look like it costs like 100 or more, but it's all through figuring out how to do that, right? And so I didn't write a $200 million movie. That's my point. I don't write scenes that will cost beyond what we can afford. I try to write scenes that are going to fit within the zone, right? And I think that's another thing. So I know I hopped around there, but it's
no,
like,
that's a fabulous strategy that we need to know about that we have not heard. So but do you do investors? Do you do banks? Do you borrow? Do you have
no? I've been working
job?
with I've worked with private investors. That's been the way I've been able to do it. So it's writing.
It's very difficult to get.
It is, and you have to, it's positioning it. But I've had to position myself as a business person first, and more than a creative person, if that makes sense. So I would say 80% of my job is working as an entrepreneur and a business owner, because without that foundation, I can't do the creative. I can sit there doing writing all the stuff I want. It doesn't matter, because I either have to go and sell someone at the studios, and think about all the thousands of scripts that they have stacked up, right? Or I think of sometimes about all these amazing scripts, and it's going to be some 22-year-old intern who's, it's their first job, and that's the person that gets to determine whether or not your script is worthy of going forward. Nothing against them, right? But it's like, my God, you would hope that it was like some seasoned, especially if you have some gem, it's really good. People know it's good. You've had good reviews on it. And then that who's the person reading it maybe they don't even like the genre, right? So my thing is, I've been like, how do I take that out of the equation and find a way to fight this battle and win without having the gatekeepers stop me? So that's been a big part of this. And so
that's a very interesting strategy too. Instead of, I'm a filmmaker and I want you to finance my film,
right.
Coming from a business perspective, entrepreneurial perspective is definitely a different strategy that I'm sure scriptwriters and producers and directors who have these grand ideas and want to get to the studios may or may not have thought about. And it's how you approach what you are, and even though you may be the script writer and you have great movie ideas, but how do I at least get into that door?
That's right, exactly. Or how do I get it made without going through that door? That's another thing, right? It's like, look, I mean, again, that key thing of like, okay, maybe I can write. I have a good idea for a story. What are the resources that I have? Do I know people who could help me actually get this shot? Do I know good actors? Do I have locations? Do I have the way to take my script and actually realize it or do a proof of concept to show what I can do, right? Those are all the angles. But I think that the idea of just, I'm going to write a good script and then I'm going to go submit it. I mean, it's like, that's a serious needle in a haystack kind of approach.
I don't think that works anymore.
I don't think it works anymore. No, I don't. It's like I said, I have people ask me all the time, how are you doing this? And I'm like, I focus on business first. It's business, business, business. Yeah.
And speaking of business, now some people would say, and so you have a movie possibly coming out 23, 24, 25. 3 things you're working on. Some people may say it's too much in a hat. For how can each one be so spectacular when, I mean, it's a lot. It's not like you're dropping one to do the other. You are literally
no. But here's the thing. Persephone's been in development for 4.5 years. So by the time we're rolling cameras on that, that'll be the 6th year of its development. People don't know that stuff, right?
Right.
The
That's
average,
why I bring it up.
Right. The average movie takes 8 to 15 years to get made. People don't know this. They're just like, oh, that was great, but they don't know that that it was that someone came up with this. What was it? I was just thinking about what was the Queen's Gambit from Netflix? That was originally first pitched in the 1980s, I think. So it's like, and I know all kinds of screenwriters who have been at it for years trying to get these things made. And producers, right? Producers I work with, they said the average time from starting down the path with a studio to actually being in the theater is about 4 years, right? So, that's just the development process. So anyway, Persephone, when I say we're going to be shooting it next year, that's after 6 years of development, right? Oceanus, I first came up with the idea for that in 2013, 2014. And, I've written numerous drafts of it since then. And so the draft that I'm working on right now is going to kind of pull together the best of all those different ideas and everything. But all the production design's already done, everything. So that's part of why I'm able to do this. If I was saying to you from scratch, I'm doing all these things, that would be impossible to do a good job making 3 things like that. But all 3 of these projects have years of development. That's the point, So
Lessons learned over the years that you've been doing this. Any do-overs? What have you learned that
absolutely.
we can learn,
Absolutely.
that our listeners and our readers can learn?
I will tell you the number one thing I would tell myself if I could travel through time is I would say, don't waste time chasing people who are not going to come through for you. I will go and you put years, months, all this time into trying to work with someone who says they're going to do something. And look, I kind of at this place where it's like a 3 strikes you're out kind of thing. It's like, you have to be open-minded. You have to be willing to listen. You have to be willing to collaborate. But if somebody drops the ball and they continue to drop the ball, you can't expect they're going to pick it up eventually and just run with it, right? You have to go find somebody else. And what I've said to myself is, if I could go back in time and put the energy, even though it might have seemed scary, like I'm like, oh my gosh, I've got this deal, I've got to make this deal happen. If I could go back and tell myself, you're not going to get that deal. What you need to do is, instead of sitting around stressing about holding on to that deal, you need to go find a different deal. And it's gonna be frustrating and it's gonna be intense, but you need to do that, and you're gonna be much more of a chance of making it if you do that. That would be the number one piece of advice that I would give to anybody is if you trust your gut, and if you see the writing on the wall, don't keep going down. Don't be like a Roomba bumping into the corners. Get out of the corners and go do something else.
What's the old saying? When people show you who they are, believe it.
Yes. Yes.
So whether it be someone lagging or breaking promises, believe it.
Exactly.
Believe it.
And another one that one of my investors told me is like, you're not gonna be able to put something in that was never there in someone, right? So in other words, if they don't
either have it or they don't.
They either have it or they don't. And if they're really not that person, the other thing is, like, I've found too, it's like I'll be sitting here, I'll hire somebody to do something, some work for me, and then I'm sitting here going, I'm doing more work than the person I hired. Right? I'm like, I want to hire people who are smarter than me, who know how to do the thing better than, right? In whatever category it is. It's like, if I'm supposed to direct, I got to direct, right? But if I'm hiring somebody to do X, Y, or Z, they need to do that the best they do that. And I shouldn't be able to come along and do that better than them. Does that make sense?
Yes.
And I feel like, even if it's not someone you're hiring, even if it's a partner that you're trying to partner with, other writers, other people, you need people who will pull their weight. And if you're committed and you're giving 100%, you need to surround yourself with other people who give 100%. Otherwise, you're wasting your time. So.
Have you lost money to where you had to recoup it? And how do you do that? Because I'm sure a lot of people, it's like having a parking ticket. That's just money down the drain.
I had a devastating thing happen back in the late 90s. I was at a time travel movie that I was doing, and we put it together, and I'd actually had a windfall project. I did a lot of marketing and commercial work at the time as a director, and I had landed this big project and had this windfall. And my writing partner and he had made some money too off the same project, and we both said, you know what, we've got enough money here to invest in this film and launch it. And so then we found investors who would come in, who said, we'll come in alongside you and we'll all do this together, right? Well, the stock market crashed.
Oh.
So we had put all our money in, and then the investors were like, well, yeah, I don't know, maybe we'll do this now. So, and of course, we weren't millionaires; they were millionaires. We're thousandaires aligned with millionaires, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then all of a sudden, the wool gets pulled out from under us by the stock market. The millionaires all walk, and we're left holding the bag, and we were left with debt. We never got the film done. It took us years. And you know what? The thing we realized is we let someone talk us into, we could have made the film. Actually, at the time, there was something called digital beta. That was a video format, and people were starting to make films where they would shoot on digital beta and then transfer it to film when they were done. And I let somebody talk me into, well, but if you shoot it on film now, it'll look at the look it'll have. Just shoot it on film. We actually had enough money to shoot it on digital beta, and we would have had a movie.
Wow.
We would have had a movie.
Lessons learned.
You know what I mean? So it's like, sometimes you can't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. Does that make sense? Like, it's like you got to say to yourself, all right, look, I got enough money to do it this way right now. Maybe I better do it. Right. And then I got something done. Having it done, and me having had a film done in digital beta in 1999 would have meant so much more to my career. Right. And then it literally took me, before I actually was rolling cameras and shooting another movie like what I wanted to at the level, I wasn't doing it again until 2014, from 99 to 2014, because I had to spend all that time trying to figure it all out. So it's a challenge.
That's a powerful message to our viewers who are trying to break it into the industry, because we all make mistakes. Unfortunately, some are more costly than others.
Yes.
And some people don't get to make it back like you did, Well,
I just kept sticking it out no matter what. I kept sticking it out, but I had some ugly years during that time period. But I was like, I still believed in myself, and I had enough feedback to know that we have enough to not give up. So I was like, I got to keep staying with this and stay with this and stay with this, because think about it. If you never give up, you'll eventually win.
Interesting. And what you said is, I believed in myself. Wow, that's powerful. Because even though people may think they have great ideas and they are pitching it, the rejections or the mishaps start making them doubt themselves.
Yeah.
And that might be the key to all the success anyways. Believing in yourself, that you do have something.
And I would add that believing in myself, what comes with that is also what I believe is a healthy measure of critiquing my own work.
Exactly. It has to come with a measure.
Right?
Absolutely. Everybody saying no.
I've met people like that. Like,
I'm awesome. Viewer. Believe it.
It's like, are you really awesome?
I'm glad you clarified that. There is a point there.
It's like you have to be, if you're going to believe in yourself, part of believing in yourself is actually having enough of a foundation to know that there's something there,
the data
to believe in, right? That's the thing, right? So that's part of it,
right?
Exactly. And receipts. And I absolutely try to surround myself with people who can call me out and go, man, I don't think that's good, or man, I think you could do better. Right? You have to have those people to drive you on. But I also have certain people that, like, it's funny. I have to talk about one thing here that's super, super interesting. This is another piece of advice. I'd love to share this one.
Yes, please.
I have realized that it is great to get feedback from the right people. Okay? Feedback from everyone is not necessarily good. And I've noticed that, like, you can waste time getting beaten up by people who hate what you wrote or hate what you did, and then you go, well, wait a minute, well, what do you normally like? Well, I like romantic comedies. Well, okay, I'm writing sci-fi film. I probably shouldn't be listening to you. Does that make sense? That's the deal,
good advice,
right? And also part of it to me is also, am I getting the advice from somebody else who has succeeded in the field that I'm attempting to succeed in myself? So in other words, if I have somebody who's actually accomplished something, and they've, like I'll tell you, if Mark Ordesky says, I've got notes for you on your script, I listen, because he did Lord of the Rings, right? If Cassian Elwes, he worked on, he did Dallas Buyers Club. If he, and Lee Daniels the Butler, right? When Cassian says, I have notes, you're darn right, I'm going to read those notes and listen to them, and I'm going to make changes, because he's been there and he's done it. Just having somebody say, hey, yeah, I got notes on your script, who's just some random person, I don't really have a lot to say to that. I've had crew members randomly go, yeah, I was reading your script, I found a couple things I want to talk to you about. Really? Okay.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, exactly. So I think part of it is knowing when to take feedback and who to take the feedback from, and surrounding yourself with people whose feedback matters.
Wow.
And there's a track record to their feedback. right?
That's good.
They have a track record so that when they give you feedback, you can look at that and go, hey, that person has succeeded. So they know what they're doing. I need to listen to them, right? But just some random person going, hey, I just don't like this or this. Well, who cares? Why do I need to listen to you?
Yeah.
And I think people, I've also had to talk to my team quite often. Like, for example, we're on YouTube, right? We've got, a couple million views on YouTube. So anybody can comment. And I'll have people come back to me on my team going, did you see that negative comment? That person said this or that. And I have to go, hey, guys, there were 50 positive comments before that one.
The negative always stands
Yeah,
out.
it's like, do we have to rewire our brains, and I'm not saying get full of yourself because you got the 50 positive comments. That's not it.
Nothing to do with it.
That's not what I'm saying. As a matter of fact, I like constructive feedback. It actually has affected me and allowed me to make changes that I think are going to make it better. Constructive feedback. But some jerk going, hey, I don't really like that because I thought that was stupid. It's like, well, I don't really care. Right. That's not.
At least if you think it's stupid, tell me why, and let's see how legitimate that is. Give me a solid why.
They don't even tell you why. Half these folks don't even tell you why. They just say, I just don't like that. It's like, oh, okay. Yeah, why? I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
One last question. How much does skill play a role in the field as to opposed to who you might know? That was big. Who do you know to get into this? I mean, is that still up there?
I think it's sadly, I think it's more who you know now than it used to be. I think it gets to be more who you know all the time. I think that the only way around beating who you know is figuring out how to do it anyway. Right. So in other words, maybe I don't know the people, so I'm going to figure out how to make something happen with what I've got. It's like being in the kitchen. It's like, what are the ingredients I have in my kitchen right now? I can't get to the store. I got to figure out how to make a gourmet meal with what's in here. I think that if you can do that, then you can make something that might attract the attention of the right people so that they can help you get down the road. But is it just, I have a great script and I'm going to go out to Hollywood with my great script? I think the odds of that are very, very low. So I think the question is having the skills and the ability, and then making the network work while you've built something great to put into that network. Does that mean right? So you can have the greatest script in the world. I often think about this. I can't even imagine how many thousands of great scripts are just sitting somewhere. I can't even imagine. I think about that all the time. I'm like, because I know of script, because it has to be, because I look at what's getting made and there's so much junk being made, and it's like, how is this getting made? It has to be because someone knew someone. Does that mean, right? It's like, well, I just got my cousin. My cousin, my cousin.
Yeah, we watch a movie like, really?
Yeah, absolutely. You're like, how did this get made? And there's all this stuff getting made, and it's like, well, it's not getting made because it's good. It's not getting made because it's the best. It's not getting made because of skills. It's getting made because someone knew someone, or someone had a quota to fill, or so, and so I'm telling you, skill, you have to have the skill to make something great, but you got to be figuring out how to get into that network or do it yourself. And the skill is what makes you have something worth presenting to either of those strategies. Does that make sense? Right? You got to have something good, or otherwise you're not going to be able to make it work on either of those tracks.
Well, you've given some really sound advice and told us a lot about what you're doing and some very exciting things. And sci-fi is a unique field that has been explored, but today can be so different because of the technology that's available to us.
Yeah.
So I'm excited to see what you bring, and then animation, and then the message behind it. Particularly, it seems like you've almost had to tweak a little bit as to how you present your science fiction to where, the future was this, but then as we talked about, the circle that we're in, but this part of the solution, or right, where we're going to be if we don't. Well, it's almost like a warning and a solution.
Exactly. We have to have multiple tracks, right? I think some of my work is going to be, here's a solution. Some of it's going to be, here's what's going to happen if it goes wrong. You know, it's in different
A
categories.
wake
But
up call.
a wake up call, absolutely. And I think that's Persephone definitely has that on many levels. You know, there's definitely a question of once we're out there in the universe, everyone wants to get out there. But once we get out there, how are we going to treat it? Are we just going to keep repeating the same mistakes we made here? That's a big question that I wanted to ask with that film.
Because I think a lot of people are numb, particularly the younger generation, are numb to the things that are happening, you know, as small as recycling, you know.
Mm-hmm.
It's very interesting. So I think, wow, I'm excited.
No,
And
thank you so much. I
to be
appreciate it.
able to find that niche that has not been presented and to make it a worth
Mm-hmm.
besides just a movie is
Mm-hmm.
an incredible thing that you're going to do for our communities, for our societies, and for our country, for our world, you know, our earth. You know, I always look for things like that. You
Oh, well,
know, what
good. Well,
is
then
the
you're
solution?
in the right place. You'll like what we're doing. You're gonna like what
Yeah.
we're doing. So
Okay. Well, thank you for being with us. This
absolutely.
is Hollywood Scriptwriter Magazine spotlight of screenwriters, producers, and directors, where we profile industry makers who tell us how they made it to the big screen. We were talking with Jeffrey Morris, an award-winning writer, director, producer, entrepreneur, and production designer. And I'm Angela Cranon, and make it a great day. Hollywood Scriptwriter Magazine is a trade publication that profiles screenwriters, producers, and directors. We let you into their lives where they tell you how they made their mark in one of the toughest industries of Hollywood, the big screen. Subscribe today at hollywoodscriptwriter.com.